A very warm welcome back to the show, and a very good evening to any listeners who just joined us. We broke there for the news transmission. This is Randolph Waites on tonight's discussion. It's a hot topic. It's access to tins of corned beef. So this is what we're discussing tonight, is the how on earth you actually get into a tin of corned beef. This was prompted by many letters and calls from our listeners over several months, I believe up to a year. There was a request for us to look at this one, and that's exactly what we're doing this evening. Just to put you in the picture, if you're not familiar with the corned beef, they generally come in if you go back to your days in geometry, in your school days, if you took mathematics, if you can consider the shape of a parallelogram, perhaps the geometrics on this corned beef tin that we're thinking about would be likes of a pyramid. So you imagine the Great Pyramids with the top chopped off. You've got a kind of rough idea of the shape there. Now the situation in regards to access made very difficult, of course, by the shape, but more so that the corned beef manufacturers generally only offer access to their tin products using a very, very small key-like implement, which is often not attached to the tin, and we have noticed a gradual, in fact, quite a quick decline and deterioration in the quality of the metal used to make the key. Excuse me. It's always got to the stage it's more of a aluminium type base, almost to the point where you could say, is this plastic or is this metal? The corned beef itself generally, once accessed, is edible. But really, who wants to sit down and eat corned beef when they've got blood pouring out of their thumb, or they've tried to access it by throwing it, against a garden fork to try and puncture the tin because they found that there was no key attached to the tin in the first place. It's not something you can call your supermarket and say, could you send round an emergency key for my corned beef? It's just not something they would do. So the point being that this is the point where we left off just before we broke for the news, is with corned beef, you've first of all got to take off the wrapper. That's almost goes without saying. You need to take the wrapping paper from the tin corned beef. That gives you a little bit of a sporting chance on getting the tin open. It's not always feasible to do so. The glue on the or the adhesive that the companies use tend to keep that paper well close to the tin for as long as possible. So again, if you're in a bit of a rush and you've been a long day and you're trying to get into the corned beef, nothing worse than trying to remove paper, which is is quite stubborn to come off its fixture. The access point on the corned beef, and just for any listeners, I beg your pardon, for any listeners who are not familiar with these tins, if you can just picture this lump, it's like two gold ingots glued together. Of course, it's not gold, but it's gold certainly if you're hungry and you want to get into your tinned corned beef. But we're talking about the 354 gram tonnage here, just so there's no questions about that we're on the right one. It's a lumpy size. It doesn't fit well with any shape of hand. So that's the first problem that most people find, is they can't readily hold it down. If you've got a tin of soup or can of soup or something, and you want to open that with a standard tin opener, whether that's a fly opener or not, you will find that you've got a level base, and that base is fairly easy to maneuver. The base is on a flat structure, which would be the case with the corned beef, except the opening side is generally on the reverse, or at least not parallel with the sitting point of the tin. The soup, when it's opened, or when you look to open the tin, really it's just following the diameter of the soup tin, making sure that you've got a clean cut all the way around, and then you just prise open the lid. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Not everybody can manage to do that, of course, and my sympathy goes out to these people who find difficulty with any tin products. But particularly with the corned beef that we're discussing tonight, it really requires some imagination and how to access the tin. If, as I say, the key has been lost, or indeed, as often happens, the key at the first turning can sometimes snap the metal, and you're left with basically you can see a small bit of the corned beef through the gap, but hardly enough to get your finger or your tongue through to get a nibble. Now the other issue here is the key itself. As we said, the metallic base on these small keys. Now the eyelet on the keys, when you feed that onto if you can imagine the tin, and if you put that on its side, for example, you will see a very, very small piece of metal protruding from the side of it. And if you were to click that key on there, and this is one of the problems lots of listeners find, that key, there's no indication which way the key should be turned, which way it should be inserted. There's no top or bottom. It's just a case of potluck. And what often happens, if you do not enter the key onto the metal in the right fashion, you often discover halfway around that it won't go any further, as all the metal strip has been used up in the turning process, and you won't be able to go any further. That really is a tragedy when that occurs. Now, if you've managed to bypass any of the initial or early problems regarding the key insertion onto the metal that protrudes, then well done you, very well done, because you're almost there. And if you can keep going, so if you just keep turning on the metal, as far as you go, just keep turning, you should be able, there's a real element of joy when you get yourself about 60 to 80% round the tin, and you find that you're going to make it. It certainly lifts your spirits. Problem is sometimes you get the full length round on the metal strip, and the corned beef itself either falls out of the tin onto the floor, and I mentioned my cat previously on another program, Middles, but Middles may well. She's not very keen on corned beef, to be perfectly honest. But again, the cat could snatch your corned beef and be out the door. So if you've got any pets, maybe a large dog or something, and the last thing you want is your prized corned beef ending up at the other side of the garden. Now the issue as well with the corned beef, if you've managed to get round the whole tin and it hasn't fallen on the floor, of course, is the opposite. You sometimes cannot get it out of the tin. Any amount of scraping with a knife or a fork, on many occasions, a good quality dinner fork has been totally ruined trying to prise the corned beef from the tin. It's bent over, almost like a Uri Geller moment, where the fork is almost split in half as a result of the pressure you require to prise out this corned beef at its exit point on the open-ended tin. It's a real problem. What we'll do, we'll stop for a little bit of music just now. We'll be straight back. Please, any callers, if you feel free to give us a quick bell, let us know any experiences or suggestions. We've got a long way to go this evening. As I say, it's an exciting show that we've got, and we look forward to some of your comments. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. That was a lovely piece of music by the lovely Alison Krauss, called Dreaming My Dreams With You, from the album Forget About It. What we're trying to do tonight is not forget about corned beef. The discussion up tonight is how to access tinned corned beef and the difficulties we all face, trying to make entry to get to the corned beef if there's problems, not just with the lost key, but the other barriers that we find when we're trying to access our favourite snack, or sometimes it's not so much a favourite snack, but it's a staple diet of some people. But corned beef, interesting call from somebody there that was just looking down. Very good point. Lots of the keys which are missing. There's been a surge in shoplifting in the supermarkets. Not for any real produce, but simply people are in taking keys off tinned corned beef, and the suggestion is that they're not really stealing these for out of any badness, but more out of necessity, in case they are caught out one day when they have a delivery or they make a purchase on corned beef and discover there's no key attached because it's been lost, or it's fallen off, or as we just found out, it's been stolen. So the corned beef tins, when you make that purchase, you really have to spend some time and just palm your hand round the whole surface of the corned beef tin and make sure that key is attached. Keep your eye on it, especially at the checkout. You never know, any nudge or bump, and that could be gone as well. So it's certainly something you need to be aware of, and perhaps even if you were to check, if you're the luxury of coming back in the motor car from your shopping excursion and your goods have been packed away in the boot, you may well have a bit of a bonanza. You might go out there, open the boot and find there's several corned beef tin keys on the base of the boot. So good luck with that. So as I say, the hot topic tonight is access to corned beef tins and the problems that we all face with that. Tonight's focus is mainly on the 354 gram tin, although there are other versions out in the market. So rather than go from one to the other, we decided that we would keep to the 354 gram. But the shape is pretty standard. It seems to be the only product on the market which defines itself by its shape, and that is in the reconstituted meat market, it seems to be the one product which is identifiable from its shape of tin, and that is of course corned beef. We had another producer's just handed me something there, and what he's got down there is we mentioned about the throwing the offending tin, which has been unopened, towards the garden fork. There are people, according to this listener at least, who actually could take their axe that would normally chop up the kindling of the wood for the fire. They take an axe through the corned beef tin, and it has been known that it's been attacked with hacksaws and chainsaws. So interesting that particular listener, who is obviously, he or she has obviously had some experience and some problems with the exact subject that we're talking about tonight. So hopefully no more problems, and you don't have to attack your corned beef tin with a heavy-handed tool just to get access. We would probably recommend worth taking it back to the store, explaining the situation, that you couldn't get access because there's no key. If you've tried to make any attempt to open it without the key, there's no chance of getting a refund, I'm afraid. But do try and persevere. There's one other listener who said that her son used to pick the lock on the corned beef tin. I don't understand what they mean by that, but apparently this listener's son was very able, and he could actually access the tin without the key. So that's an interesting one as well. The corned beef, that we tend to enjoy, mainly had had its roots in the beef trade in Argentina, of course. So most of our corned beef does cross the South Atlantic to reach us. It's not something it's terribly well manufactured here on home turf. But if anyone has ever tasted corned beef, they will know only too well how delicious that product can be, on its own, or with potatoes, for example. The other thing is the fact that the bully beef, as for the older generation and those who are obviously up in the world history, in the First and Second World War, it was the staple diet of the troops of the British Empire. And on the front line, of course, was to eat corned beef, and it was so nicknamed bully beef. And of course, bully beef was actually a anglicised version of the French bouillie, which actually means boiled beef. The corned beef, for any listeners who are not familiar with the item, is simply a brisket of beef that's been cured or pickled. It does contain a huge amount of salt, and it's certainly one you have to watch for the cholesterol, because if you're not taking your statins, then corned beef generally is got a high cholesterol and salt composition. However, as I say, it's been a staple diet of many, and an emergency foodstuff for lots of people, lots of generations actually, for decades and decades, and as we talked about into the last century, with the troops on the front line in the First World War. So we'll listen to everybody's comments here as they come through. Obviously, we can't mention all the comments, and but one here regarding the key of the actual opening. is a scientist who's said that it's actually a metal alloy which has been used, and the key is a softer composition than the rest of the metal, and that's why there's been problems with that. The same person suggests that from just a comment we made a few moments ago, that the binding of the metal strip that follows round, and that's the guideline for where you are intent in opening. So that your intention is to follow the metal strip, which is of a softer metal than the combined composite of the surrounding corned beef. The scientist who talked about the tin as in its entirety has stated that there's been a change in the formula, and corned beef as far back as, and strange we just mentioned about the war, could have been opened with the bayonet of a First World War rifle, or Second World War for that matter. So that's interesting, and then we thank the comments for that from that individual. We're also very pleased to have been told about the metal alloy that's been used by another listener, and what they were basically saying is that the reason there's so many thefts of keys from corned beef tins in supermarkets and grocery shops generally is that not all the varieties offer the same quality metal alloy in their key. So some are actually of a better quality, and it may well answer why so many of the tins have been delivered or purchased and then discovered by the owner not to have the key attached. Interesting stuff. We're going to stop for a weather update, and we'll be back as quick as we can. And welcome back to tonight's show. Transmission for the weather forecast. The reason we had to break. If there's any fresh listeners joined us at this late time, we're talking about access to corned beef tins, and more specifically the 354 gram variety. Interesting callers. There's been a lot of callers tonight. We're very pleased with the uptake. There was another gentleman who remembers that at Christmas time there was nothing, in his words, there's nothing more joyous than to receive a corned beef key in his Christmas stocking. So that's a nice thought. Another one was on the same line actually, was back in the 1950s. They remember always gathered around mother's side or grandmother's side, and when the tin of corned beef was being opened, and it was to see who would be able to catch the key, and when it was tossed over the shoulder. So all interesting stuff. If you've got any comments like that, we'd be very interested to hear them. For now, we're more concentrating on the actual mechanics of the corned beef tin and making access. The producer has mentioned that one, when the weather forecast was up there, that one caller had suggested that if any of the listeners want to use a magnet, if they lift the key with the magnet prior to opening the tin, it will always appear the right way up. So that's very interesting. So what I'm assuming they mean is the key that you've got to insert into the little metal hoop on the side. If you lift that with a magnet, you will always make sure you've got that correct metal side to then insert, and you should have a free turn the full diameter of the tin. No one's offered any explanations as to the shape of the tin, whether it was the best way to to preserve the boiled beef, the corned beef. I know it's packed with rock salt and stuff like that, but it doesn't give any answers from any listeners or anything we've discovered as to why the corned beef is in such a shapely and oddly shaped tin. Producers tell me we've got someone on the line who has worked in the supermarket trade for many years, and they were advising to producer that excuse me, there was a big discussion with some of the supermarket chains on the way of moving forward regarding corned beef. That was generally because customers were making complaints to the supermarket chains directly, not the corned beef producers themselves. So the debate and the discussion we've had this evening has been all good. There's not more to add. We're kind of running out of time here. This was, of course, an extended version of the normal 1 hour show. So we're delighted to have you for the last 1 hour and 25 minutes almost. Very pleased with your patience throughout the show. As I say, I was looking at the diary for future discussions. We have upcoming show which might be of interest to some of our listeners, and that is about egg cups and how prevalent egg cups are in today's society, and more specifically, the show was looking at the idea of perhaps getting a database for unwanted egg cups, or so that those without egg cups and wanted egg cups could access that at a small fee. All good stuff. That's us out of time. I'm not getting any green flags from the producer tonight, so that will be the end of the show, and we thank you for your time. Good night.